Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling something I know you're particularly interested in, how we actually get better at understanding and communicating through writing. You shared this fascinating 1996 paper from Educational Psychology Review by Butterfield, Hacker, and Albertson. It's all about what goes on, in our heads, in our environment, when we revise text.
Right.
For someone like you, always looking to learn and acquire knowledge effectively, this feels like gold because revision is so central to both learning and, well, clear communication.
Exactly. And what's fascinating here is that this paper really marks a point of reflection in the field. As the authors highlight, around 1980, researchers started to seriously investigate the cognitive processes behind writing, and that naturally included revision.
Right?
This paper essentially steps back and says, okay, what have we learned about how we revise since then? It gives us a really solid foundation.
Okay, so to get our bearings, the paper uses this framework, a sort of updated model of revision from Flower and her colleagues back in '86. It basically says there's a bunch of interconnected things that influence how we revise. Can you give us a quick overview of the main buckets they look at?
Certainly. Think of it like this. First, there are the external factors, the environment we're in when we revise, including the specific task and the text itself.
Okay.
Then there are the internal factors, our cognitive resources, our knowledge, the strategies we use, and how we picture the text in our minds.
Mental representation.
Yeah. Layered on top of that are metacognitive factors, which is our awareness of our own thinking and our ability to control our learning and strategies.
Right, thinking about thinking.
Exactly. And finally, underpinning all of this is our working memory, that limited mental workspace where all this processing happens.
Got it. So environment, cognition, metacognition, all held together by working memory. Let's dive into those environmental influences first. The first one they talk about is the rhetorical problem. What exactly does that mean in plain English?
Think of the rhetorical problem as the whole situation surrounding your writing, who you're writing for, what you're trying to achieve with your text, and the broader context of the task. The paper breaks this down into a few key parts, starting with the actual topic of the text.
Makes sense. So what did the research uncover about how the topic influences what we change when we revise?
There were some interesting and perhaps a bit surprising findings. For example, Benton and Blum looked at students writing about American wastefulness.
Okay.
They found that asking students questions about the topic after they'd finished writing but before they revised mostly led to them adding more basic examples, like base-level ideas.
There's more details.
Yeah, pretty much. It didn't really push them to make bigger changes to the overall argument or, the rhetorical approach.
Yeah.
It seems the type of topic knowledge and how it's activated are crucial. Simply having more facts isn't always enough for deeper revision. What do you make of that?
That's fascinating. You'd think that getting people to think more about the topic would automatically lead to more substantive revisions. It almost sounds like just jogging their memory for details doesn't necessarily make them rethink their main points.
Exactly. But then you have studies like McCutcheon and her team and Butterfield and others around the same time looking at different topics like Christopher Columbus and Washington state weather.
Right.
They found that when people had more background knowledge on the topic, they tended to make more revisions that focused on the meaning of the text.
Ah,
However, things like fixing typos or grammatical errors, surface stuff, weren't really linked to how much they knew about the subject matter.
so it's like knowing more about the topic helps us refine the substance, the actual message, but it doesn't necessarily make us better proofreaders. That's a key distinction.
Yeah.
The next part of the rhetorical problem is the audience. We all intuitively know how important it is to tailor our writing to who we're talking to.
Absolutely. And the research really backs this up in the context of revision. The paper points to a consistent trend across several studies by Traxler and Gernsbacher, Shriver, and others.
Okay.
When revisers were given clear and specific information about their intended audience, it consistently led to more effective revisions, especially in terms of making descriptions clearer and more understandable for that particular audience.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It seems like having a clear picture of the reader in mind acts as a powerful filter when we're deciding what to change.
That totally resonates. If you know you're explaining a complex idea to someone who's new to the topic, you're much more likely to look for jargon or unclear explanations when you reread your work. So the first two parts of the rhetorical problem are the topic and the audience. What's the third piece?
That's the perceived importance of the revision task itself. How much effort we're willing to put into revising often hinges on how important we believe it is.
Can you give us a real-world example of how that plays out?
Beeson's 1993 study with college students is a great illustration. They found that students revised a whopping 90% of the feedback they received from their professors on their papers.
90%. Wow.
But when they got similar kinds of feedback from their classmates, they only acted on about 57% of it.
Big difference.
Huge. This really highlights how the source of the feedback, and therefore the weight we give to it, significantly impacts our revision efforts. Professor feedback just carries a lot more perceived importance, right?
Wow, that's huge. It really underscores how much external validation or maybe authority can drive our revision process.
It does, and Wallace and Hayes in 1991 looked at this from a slightly different angle. They told students that expert writers tend to focus on making global revisions things like the overall structure and clarity of the argument.
Big picture stuff.
Exactly. They discovered that just by giving students this insight into expert practices, they saw a significant increase in those kinds of high-level revisions, which ultimately led to better writing.
So just knowing what the pros do matters.
It suggests that understanding what's considered important, especially by those we perceive as experts, can really shape where we focus our revision energy.
Okay, so the rhetorical problem topic, audience importance, sets the stage. Now, let's move on to the other environmental factor, the actual text itself. Obviously, what we're revising matters.
Absolutely. The characteristics of the text we're working with, its format, its genre, the language it uses, how complex it is, and its overall persuasive power all play a significant role.
Right.
And it's important to remember that when we revise, we're not just reacting to the words on the page, we're interacting with our mental representation of that text, which, as we discussed, is already shaped by the rhetorical problem and our own cognitive processing as we read it.
Let's zoom in on some of those text characteristics, starting with genre. Does it matter if we're revising a story versus an essay, for instance?
The research here suggests that genre's influence might be more subtle than some other factors. Studies on error detection, like the one by Butterfield and colleagues again.
Them again.
Yeah, they did a lot in this area. They found that the type of error, whether it's about meaning, grammar, or word choice, seems to be a bigger predictor of whether we'll spot it than the genre of the text.
Interesting.
Meaning-based errors are generally harder to catch than grammatical ones, which are harder than just a wrong word, regardless of whether it's a narrative or an expository piece.
So semantic errors are sneaky.
Very. This suggests that our underlying knowledge and cognitive strategies for language processing might be more dominant than genre in just finding mistakes.
Okay, so the type of mistake is more critical than the type of writing when it comes to finding errors. But what about the kinds of revisions we choose to make? Do we focus on different things depending on the genre?
Pialet and Rousey's preliminary work in 1991 offered a glimpse into this. They found some initial evidence suggesting that adults might make different types of revisions, like more local changes versus more global, structural changes depending on whether they were revising a narrative or a descriptive text.
Okay, so some hint of a difference.
Yeah, but they were careful to point out that this was early research and that the difficulty of the text itself likely plays a role as well. It's complex.
And what about even broader genre distinctions, like narrative versus persuasive writing? Did that make a big difference?
Ransdell and Levy in 1994 actually found that the impact of these really broad genre categories on the writing process overall was relatively small.
Huh.
Interestingly, they did see that expert writers made more revisions that changed the meaning when they were writing expository letters to an unfamiliar audience.
Okay.
While less experienced writers didn't show as much of a difference across genres or audiences.
It sounds like while genre might have some influence, it's intertwined with other factors, like the writer's expertise and their awareness of the audience. Always complicated, isn't it?
Always.
What about authorship? Is revising our own work fundamentally different from revising someone else's? Intuitively, I'd say yes.
This is a really interesting question, and yeah, intuitively, we might think there would be a big difference. However, the research has been a bit complex. Hull's 1987 study, which tried to address this, had some significant methodological issues, including different types and numbers of errors in the self-written versus other-written essays, making its conclusions unreliable. So we need to be cautious about drawing firm conclusions from that one study.
Fair enough. Bad data in, bad conclusions out. So what do other studies say about the impact of authorship on revision?
Daneman and Stainton, along with Butterfield and colleagues again, suggest that our deeper knowledge of the topic when it's our own writing plays a significant role.
Our insider knowledge.
Exactly. In Butterfield's study, teachers revised their own autobiographical essays in distinct ways compared to how they revised others' essays, tending to add more content and make more meaning-focused changes.
Right. Yeah.
However, the key finding was that when the reviser's knowledge of the topic was similar to the original author's, if they were both experts on the subject, those differences in revision tended to decrease.
So it really points back to topic knowledge again.
It really does. It seems topic familiarity is a major driver.
That makes perfect sense. You're going to have a much richer understanding of your own intended meaning and be better equipped to refine it. Okay, the last text characteristic they discuss is text sophistication, how complex or advanced the writing is. What do they find there?
Butterfield and colleagues, in that same 1994 study, compared how students in grades 5 through 8 revised texts written at a 5th grade level versus an 8th grade level.
Okay, simpler versus more complex.
Right. They observed that more revisions aimed at preserving or clarifying the meaning were made on the simpler 5th grade level texts. Conversely, more copy editing, focusing on grammar, spelling, and punctuation, was done on the more sophisticated 8th grade level texts.
So fix meaning on simple stuff, fix mechanics on complex stuff.
Kind of. And interestingly, when a text needed both types of changes, revisers tended to prioritize the meaning-focused ones. It's as if we triage the revisions based on the perceived need and complexity.
That's insightful. We adjust our focus based on the text's demands.
Okay, we've covered the environmental factors. Let's move into the cognitive influences, which are all about what's going on in our long-term memory. The first one is our representation of the text. How do we actually build that mental understanding?
Well, the paper emphasizes that reading isn't just passively absorbing words. It's a really active process of constructing a mental representation.
Building a model in our head.
Precisely.
Yeah.
We're constantly using our existing knowledge and various reading strategies to build an understanding. This comprehension happens at multiple levels, from recognizing individual words and understanding sentence structure,
Syntax.
all the way to grasping the overall meaning and the main points of the text, the gist, as it's often called.
So when I'm reading something I've written, it's not just the words on the page I'm reacting to, but my internal movie or understanding of what I meant to say.
Exactly. And this mental representation, the model suggests, is a sort of shared space for both reading and writing.
Common ground. Yeah. Whether you're trying to understand someone else's words or revise your own, you're drawing on similar knowledge and cognitive processes to build that internal understanding. In fact, research indicates that these shared knowledge and processes might explain a significant portion of why we see a connection between someone's reading and writing abilities.
Because they rely on the same core skills.
They're two sides of the same cognitive coin, really.
That makes perfect sense. So being a strong reader likely makes you a better reviser because you're more skilled at building that comprehensive mental model.
Precisely. And when we're revising, we're not just thinking about the text itself, we're also building a mental representation of our intended audience, what they know, what they might believe, and how they're likely to interpret what we've written.
Thinking about the reader's mind.
Exactly. This understanding of the reader then becomes another crucial element that shapes our revision decisions.
Okay, the next cognitive influence is simply knowledge itself. What different kinds of knowledge are important when it comes to revising text?
The paper highlights 3 key types. First, there's topic knowledge, which we've already discussed quite a bit, how much we know about the subject matter.
Right.
Second is discourse knowledge, which is our understanding of how different types of texts are structured, like knowing how an argument is typically laid out versus how a story unfolds.
Text structure schemas.
And the third is revision knowledge, which is our explicit understanding of what revision is, why it's important, and different strategies we can use to do it effectively.
Knowing about revising.
Exactly.
And how do these different types of knowledge contribute to the revision process?
Well, we've already seen that strong topic knowledge tends to lead to more in-depth revisions focused on meaning. Discourse knowledge helps us assess whether our text is organized logically and effectively communicates its intended message.
Checking the flow and structure.
Right. And perhaps most importantly for someone interested in learning, direct instruction in revision, explicitly teaching what it is and how to do it, has been shown to significantly improve a student's ability to identify problems in their writing, understand what needs to be changed, and then actually make those changes.
So it can be taught.
Definitely. It's not just an innate skill, it can be taught and learned.
That's really encouraging to hear. It reinforces the idea that we can actively develop our revision abilities. The third cognitive influence is strategies. What kind of mental strategies are involved in text revision?
These are the specific cognitive procedures we use to process information. They can range from general thinking strategies to specific comprehension strategies we use when reading, and of course, targeted writing and revising strategies.
Got to.
Yeah. These strategies can be either monitoring strategies like rereading a section or comparing different parts of the text to see if they align,
Checking for consistency.
or control strategies, which are the actions we take to fix problems, like summarizing a paragraph to check for clarity or actually rewriting a sentence to improve its grammar.
Okay, monitoring and controlling.
Right.
And how do these strategies come into play when we're revising?
Well, when we read our own writing with the intention of revising, we're often subconsciously or sometimes consciously monitoring our comprehension.
Hmm.
If we hit a point where something feels unclear or doesn't quite make sense, that triggers a need to evaluate the problem and then select and apply a strategy to address it,
Find it and fix it.
basically. And just like with revision knowledge, research has shown that explicitly teaching students different revision strategies can significantly improve both the quality and the types of revisions they make. Some studies have even demonstrated the effectiveness of teaching more comprehensive sets of multiple strategies together.
Like a strategy toolkit.
Exactly. It's about equipping yourself with a toolkit of mental actions you can take.
So it's not enough to just know what to revise. We also need to know how to go about it. That brings us to metacognitive influences. This is all about our awareness and control of our own thinking during the revision process, right? Thinking about our thinking.
Precisely. A stronger metacognitive understanding of writing processes and how different types of texts are structured has been linked to higher quality writing, especially in more formal, expository writing.
Makes sense.
Metacognition allows us to monitor our own comprehension as we're reading our draft and to identify when our understanding breaks down. This awareness then allows us to select and apply appropriate fix-up strategies to address those comprehension issues.
Being your own quality control.
It's like being your own editor. Yeah, constantly checking if the message is landing as intended.
And is it possible to improve these metacognitive skills related to writing and revision? Can we get better at being our own editor?
The research suggests that yes, it is possible. Instruction specifically designed to enhance metacognitive understanding, monitoring, and control often leads to improvements in both writing and revision abilities.
That's good news.
However, as the paper points out, it can sometimes be difficult in educational settings to completely separate the impact of metacognitive instruction from the specific cognitive strategies that are often taught alongside it.
The confounding variables problem.
Exactly, they tend to work hand in hand.
It's like trying to figure out which ingredient in a recipe had the biggest impact on the final flavor. Okay, the final piece of our puzzle is working memory. We all know that's got a limited capacity, like the RAM on a computer. How does this impact text revision?
That's a perfect analogy. Writing, and especially revision, involves juggling a lot of different cognitive tasks, simultaneously planning what to say, translating those thoughts into written words, and then reviewing what we've written.
Planning, translating, reviewing.
Right, all of these tasks draw on our working memory resources. The act of sentence generation itself, translating our ideas into grammatically correct and coherent sentences, can be particularly demanding on working memory.
Just getting the words out takes effort.
A lot of effort. When our mental RAM is full with just getting the words down, we have fewer resources left over for the careful review and revision process.
So it's a balancing act. If the initial act of writing is very demanding, it can leave less mental space for effective revision later on.
Exactly. However, here's where some of the other factors we've discussed come back into play. For example, having strong topic knowledge can actually ease the burden on working memory during the initial writing phase.
How so?
When you know your subject matter well, you don't have to spend as much mental energy generating ideas, which frees up those working memory resources for the subsequent revision.
Less searching for ideas.
Right. Similarly, comprehension monitoring, while crucial for catching errors, also consumes working memory. This might explain why younger or less skilled readers sometimes struggle to identify errors in their own writing, even if they can recall what they wrote.
Even if they know the rules.
Yeah, their working memory might just be overloaded with the basic task of reading and comprehending their own text.
And I would imagine that if we've practiced and internalized certain revision strategies, they become more automatic and therefore demand less of our precious working memory capacity than if we have to consciously think through every single step, like muscle memory for writing.
That's precisely the idea. Well-learned and automatic revising strategies likely require less working memory, leaving more mental resources available for other important aspects of the revision process, like considering the audience or the overall clarity of the argument.
Makes sense. Automate the basics to free up space for the hard stuff. We've really covered a lot of ground: the environmental context, our internal cognitive resources, our metacognitive awareness, and the role of working memory. It sounds like these are all interconnected in a pretty complex way.
You're absolutely right. It's a dynamic system, and as the paper points out, our understanding of how these different influences interact is still evolving.
Figuring it out.
Definitely. Berninger and her colleagues have done some insightful work looking at how these relationships might change as writers develop. They found that for younger students, more basic translation skills like
Yeah,
handwriting and
the
spelling,
mechanics.
yeah, the mechanics,
Yeah.
tend to have a bigger impact on overall writing quality. But as students mature and those lower level skills become more automatic, cognitive and metacognitive factors become increasingly influential.
So the bottleneck shifts.
Exactly. This suggests that the way these different parts of the model interact shifts as our writing abilities mature.
That makes perfect sense. For younger learners, just getting their thoughts down on paper might be the primary challenge, leaving less cognitive bandwidth for higher-level revision tasks.
Exactly. They're maxing out their working memory just on translation.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the influences on text revision, what are the key things you think someone like our listener should take away from this research? Big picture.
I think the big picture is that revising text isn't just about fixing typos at the end. It's a really complex cognitive activity that's shaped by a wide range of
It's
factors.
multifaceted.
Very much so. These include the specific context of the writing task, our own knowledge and the strategies we bring to the table, our awareness of our own thinking and understanding, and, crucially, the inherent limitations of our mental workspace, our working memory.
Right.
For someone focused on effective learning and communication, understanding these different pieces of the puzzle can provide valuable insights into how we can better refine our own ideas and ensure our messages are clear and impactful.
And it sounds like this is still a very active area of research with plenty of unanswered questions.
Yeah.
What are some of the key areas that the paper highlights as needing further investigation? Where do we go next?
While there are several exciting avenues for future research, for instance, we still need a more precise understanding of exactly how factors like audience awareness, the authorship of the text, and the text's complexity influence our revision choices and effectiveness. The mechanisms aren't fully clear.
The how.
Exactly. We also need to delve deeper into the interplay between our knowledge of a topic and our broader understanding of different text structures, discourse knowledge, and how those interact during revision.
Topic versus structure knowledge.
Yeah, teasing those apart. And finally, the intricate relationship between our working memory capacity and our metacognitive abilities during the revision process is another area that warrants much further exploration.
Lots left to discover, it seems.
Yeah.
So for you, our listener, as you reflect on all of this, the next time you're reviewing something you've written, maybe consider all these different factors at play. How is the specific situation? Who are you writing for? What's your goal influencing how you approach your revisions? How are your own knowledge and strategies shaping your process? Are you consciously monitoring your understanding as you reread? And, crucially, are you keeping in mind the finite capacity of your working memory as you try to make your revisions more effective?
Good questions to ask.
It's a lot to consider, but hopefully this deep dive has given you some valuable insights into this fascinating aspect of learning and communication. Thanks for diving into with us.